So let's get started. Just note that today, while everything you'll probably see today has been released as of Data Insight 3.10, the LiveMap functionality is in public beta. We may end up discussing things that are future looking or future thinking based around additional use cases or features that are part of our roadmap. Just keep a note that all of that stuff is just targeted. It's not committed. Things are subject to change, et cetera, et cetera. So just keeping that keeping it in mind will be very helpful. So before we get well into started, I wanted to go over some definitional stuff because everybody's sort of in different places with their contact of what are maps within SevOne. So to start, I might use terminologies like SURF, which is our SevOne Unified Reporting Framework. It is basically the reporting tool as part of the NMS. So if you are used to the NMS, looking into the NMS and looking at reports or visualizations of data within the NMS, you are using the SevOne Unified Report Framework, SURF. Data Insight came along a couple of years ago to start taking over those same responsibilities from SURF, but just want to be really clear when we're talking because some of these names overlap each other's. Status maps was basically SURF's mapping technology, and it was a basic way to see the status of devices and objects, alert status within devices and objects within the NMS. So it's a little different from LiveMaps, which was a widget that exists within Data Insight today. It was introduced, I think, stretching my brain way back, 1.6 or something along those lines. And it provides a little bit more functionality over top of status maps in order to provide more functionality around alert status for devices and objects. So it was a part of the core Data Insight offering. What we're talking about today is the new LiveMaps, which, like I said earlier, is currently in beta, and it is the latest version of mapping technology within Data Insight. And as we'll see, it provides a lot more than just status of devices and objects. So the new LiveMaps will be replacing the old LiveMaps, and we will be able to see all of the new and wonderful things that the new LiveMaps is going to provide. But before we get started, we wanted to ask a quick poll. So I believe Elizabeth is going to pop those questions up for there. Yep, there they are. And we just wanted to get some feedback on who's using what today and what the interest level is for some of these features. So if everyone kind of takes a minute or two to fill out the survey, that would be great. All right, we have some results up. All right. So the first question, do you currently use SURF reporting? So about 44% of you said no, 33% said yes. So as the product manager of Data Insight, that makes me happy because hopefully that means you guys have moved on to Data Insight. How many of you are using status maps? So only 11% are using status maps, and 33% are no, and then 22% are NA. Are you currently using Data Insight? 67% said yes, so that makes me very happy as a product manager to hear that the vast majority of you are using Data Insight. And do you currently use LiveMaps? That's about 33% yes and 11% no. That's actually interesting to see. And then do you currently use another technology? So 33% said yes. So it seems like we have an audience of map users who are interested in learning more about mapping. So that's really great. So we'll have another poll in the future, but for now, I think we're just gonna move on. So why did we tackle sort of redoing LiveMaps? Well, we've been at SevOne product management across the board, but obviously Data Insight specifically, been hearing the same number of things from users for quite some time. And the general gist is we've heard things like, I want to do more with my data. Basically that, hey, we collect a lot of data, we collect a large amount of data at scale, but I want to be able to do more with that data. Similarly, we've heard quotes like, I want to get more value out of the data that I'm already collecting. So the idea of coming and saying, we want you to collect more here, there, and everywhere, it's like, that's great, but I want to be able to find what I'm already looking at. And then finally, I want to provide more insight to my users. So the general gist of what we heard is that you want to unlock the potential of the data that is already there. And so the product management team at large, but specifically within data insight, because obviously we deal with the visualization of the layer of the data. We give you, if anyone's going to unlock the potential of that data, it's probably going to be within data insight. So we took that very, very seriously. And so one of the first steps we took on that journey was providing a lot of out-of-the-box reports. And so we did this around the 3.0 change, where we saw a lot of adoption pick up for data insight, where we sort of redid a lot of the core guts. And we provided this as our network performance report, and I'll show that in a minute in our live demo environment. But the idea being is, hey, you can really quickly within this report see what's going on. However, when we looked at this, we recognized that while this is great, tabular data is wonderful for showing you all of the details that you might care about. It is oftentimes hard to distinguish, what is the most severe versus, what is less severe, what you look at first, what are the most critical things. So we provided a bunch of views, pie charts and bar charts and etc., along with a bunch of interactivity so that you could start filtering down with interactions in order to get to the things that you wanted most. And all of this was really wonderful at providing more value of the data that was being collected. But we recognized this sort of violated an internal principle that we've been trying to push of the 5-second rule. Within 5 seconds of looking at this screen, can you tell me what's the most severe, what's the least severe, what you should do next, where you should go, etc. And so what we wanted to really do was provide a view that gave you more value than that. So what we really wanted to do was change this view to look something more like this, or even like this. And the idea being here now, when you look at this, you can see the relationships of what's connected to what. What is the severity? Where should you look first? What should you do? Where should you go in order to find most value out of the data that you're already collecting? So I'm going to hop over into a demo right now and kind of walk through all of these features one by one. But the key value here is, as you look at that, nothing was added to the NMS in order to enable this stuff. This is just taking the data that was already there, leveraging it in a new way to provide more value in order to give the ability to have more value out of what you're already looking for. And that's sort of the mission statement. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing real quick and switch over to our actual demo environment. All right, so let me get out of that. And I'm going to start sharing. Sure, there we go. Excellent. Okay, so as I said, we have our network performance report, and we have it split down here. So here I'm looking at the Chicago device group, and I can kind of see, these are all my alerts. Okay, that's great. I can see that Chicago here has the largest number of alerts here. I can also look down here, but there's a couple of things that are missing. It's really hard to say, hey, what's the breakdown of all those alerts within this particular device? Is there a relationship between the firewall and the core device and the edge device? How are they related? What are the upstream and downstream effects? These are all things that are really hard to answer with a view like this. So what we've done is we've provided a new place, and I'm going to pop this out for the temporary time being. And the big key here is that we wanted to make maps something that weren't necessarily tied into the report ecosystem. And we did that sort of for two reasons. One, that the maps can then be reused and shared across multiple reports. So you can make a single network status map or whatever the case may be, and then you can use that in one or many reports. And as you update that map, those changes automatically go out to all of those reports. But also additionally, sometimes you might not be able to predict a customer or user's needs. And maybe you just want to provide them a safe space to go where they can click around and they can interact and they can search for what they're looking for. They can explore the data that is already there in a way that wasn't pre-canned for them to provide more value. And we'll kind of show you through the map creation process how that can kind of be a workflow for them to find what they're looking for. But for right now, we're just going to click in here. We're immediately dumped into the maps playground. And I'm going to come over here to the manage maps to kind of show you an example map that I've already looked at. And so here what I've done is I've actually taken this sort of the general network performance map, and I've laid it out here with a couple of device groups and all of the devices within them onto a map where you can see see what's going on very quickly. So when we talk about that 5-second rule of, within 5 seconds, can you digest all this data? What we've done is we've used a couple of different ways to attract the eye to the things that are most relevant. So as a non-experienced user of Data Insight with this new feature, you could come in here and we basically chosen two dimensions of how to attract the eye so that you know what you're looking at and know what you need to go pay attention to. And we've done that with size and with color. So as you notice here on the right, we have our breakdown of alert severity colors, and that's universal across the product. So that's something that's a creature comfort, and it's something that users can rely on in terms of the colors here. And all of the nodes, all of these circles on the map that are in this case representing devices are showing that alert status by color. So here I can quickly see based on the color that the Chicago access point over here, the New York City core, the New York City switch, and the New York City firewall, they all have that red coloring. But additionally, we said, hey, when everything is red, or if a lot of things are red, it's hard to know which one to look at first. So we basically taking the idea of color and we've also enhanced it with size. So we've done this where the number of alerts for a particular node determines how large or small the node will be. And what this does is it takes something like that has no alerts, say this Chicago device up here, it's green and it's tiny. It's almost ignorable. It doesn't really just grab your attention. Your eyes aren't really drawn to it. Same thing with the Chicago, the core device over here. But this New York City switch, it's big, it's red, it's in your face. And so you can very quickly look at this and immediately see, hey, what's going on? Where are there things that are bad? And so you see both here in this New York City, hey, there's a lot of things that seem to be going wrong here. And then more importantly, the linkages between them all happen to have alerts as well, which really lends the eye to say the problem area is probably in New York, or additionally, possibly in Chicago, since there's some issues over here. But as a user, very quickly to say, I want to go and look at these devices. But this is a conceptual map. It's a network diagram layout. And while we give you the option as a user to switch between a bunch of different views to see what the relationships might be, a lot of use cases also lay out around actual geography. Devices exist in a place. We're talking about Chicago. We're talking about New York. These places are real places. So why wouldn't we want to show those overlaid on a map so they can see where they exist in the world? We wanted to do something better than basically saying, make a map that's for geography and make a map that's for Canvas. We wanted to say it's important for a user to have access to both of those views because they both have advantages and disadvantages. Here, it's very easy to see potentially a hierarchy, or as a map creator, I may lay out this map to look exactly the way that I want it to look, where the regions are broken out and everything makes sense. But I still also want to be able to click a button and hop over and look at a geographic map as well. And we see this to be very powerful, especially when combined with the ability to add bookmarks, where you can quickly hop around a map and say, I want to look at London and see what's there, and be able to see what's going on there. But I can also come over and make sure that the West Coast is fine. But I can really see when I took that canvas map and laid it out over the geography, the East Coast of the United States and sort of the Midwest seem to be really having problems. And I can come in and I can start looking and saying, it really appears as though New York City is the one that's having problems. And I can come in and look at more detail. And as you notice, that collectively large giant node has broken up into the individual devices beneath it. So at this level, I can see specifically what's going on, and I can see what these devices have. But as I back out and the map becomes more cluttered and it becomes more difficult to see what's going on, we start actually collapsing those things together so that you actually get a more summarized view when you're looking at a higher scale map. And so we basically collapse those details out to give you a little information there as well. So that's really powerful, the ability to switch back and forth between Canvas and map. And it's great. It's great that you can consume this and you can see what's going on. But we wanted to provide a lot more context within this view. So we have this side panel over here, and the side panel is actually showing a pie chart of alert severities broken down across all of the alerts that are on the map. And then obviously we have what look, very similar in concept to the alert details widget, where I can scroll through all of the alerts, see what's going on, and I have the ability to look at the message for them. And actually, as of DI 3.8, we have the ability to interact with alerts. So right within here, I can acknowledge an alert, I can assign an alert to a particular user, or I can comment. So I could come in and say, I'm going to start investigating this alert, and then assign it to myself and say, hey, I'm going to come in and look at admin and just assign it to myself since I'm currently acting as the admin. But we wanted to also have all of that good, rich interactivity that exists in data insight reports today. So I actually have the ability to say, hey, I only really want to look at the emergencies because those are the things I care about the most. And when I do that, you'll see that everything else grays out, and the alert details widget here actually filters down and shows me just those emergencies. And so you have that sort of interactivity. I also have that interactivity with the map itself. So I can come over here and say, it's that New York switch that's giving me problems, and I can click on that. And immediately on the side panel here, I'm actually showing alerts. This particular switch only has a couple emergency and a bunch of critical alerts. They're all here, filtered by device name, and I can actually come down and look at those individual alerts for this particular device. And so from here, you can actually start out at a very high level of your entire map, and then actually drive down to see specific alerts about specific devices. And we said, wow, that takes the idea of the network performance report where you're looking at the context of reports. It gives you a lot of power to very quickly see relationships and then drive down, look at individual alerts, and then interact with those alerts. But if you're familiar with the network performance report, the network performance report doesn't just show you alerts. It also shows you a ton of metric information. And you're already collecting that metric information because we are alerting on that metric information. So why would a map just be about alerts when we have all this other information? So we've actually gone and said, hey, maps can also be not just about alerts, but they can also be about metrics. And we've provided a metrics tab. So I come over here, looking at the entire map. And what we do by default is we provide the ability to customize or choose 3 top-end views that might show important information about the map based on what the map is being designed to do. So here we're looking at top-end views for the most utilized interfaces, maximum ping time, and the most errored interfaces. So I can quickly see like, hey, what's going on where on the map in terms of issues. But because I've added metric information to this map, I come and actually look at octets in and out for any of the links on this map. So here I've picked this particular object, and if you look over here, I actually have 2 metrics assigned to it, both in and out octets, and I get a nice table view, or I can see the average, the min, or the average, the max, the total in bits per second. And then I actually have a line graph here where I can actually look at what the actual values were over, I think the default is a day. So I'm looking at the past 24 hours, so I can actually see impact here. And again, these things are interactive, so I can actually turn off and say I only want to look at the in octets, or conversely, I only want to look at out octets, so I can see what those values are. So I can dive in real deep and say, hey, what was there a couple of hours ago? And so this again gives you more information in a single view in a single navigation space in order to see what's going on at the metric level. But we also said it's great just to show you that information, but being able to show that information on the map is also very helpful. So if you look back at this at the map over here, you can see that the paths between the nodes, the lines between the circles essentially, they are colored, and they are colored based on alert status. So over here, if I click this link, we'll notice that there aren't any alerts, but if I come down here, this has 1 critical alert, etc. However, unlike the nodes, they don't seem to be sized by alerts. This green one seems to be bigger than orange. This green one definitely seems to be bigger than this orange one. And that's because I'm actually sizing the links based on their metric value. So if I come over and I click on this Ethernet device there and I look at the metric information, if I see this, I'm hovering somewhere around, within 990 megabits per second, which is very large. If I come down to the one below it, I'm hovering, less than 100 megabits per second. And as a result, this link is actually much larger. So we're actually taking the metric value, the KPI, and we're actually giving you the ability to size the line based on that value. So this gives you the ability to say, I want to see what links are being utilized more, who's having more throughput, as another metric to say, hey, maybe in this case, these links don't have a ton of traffic going over them, but you could imagine that perhaps they are having a critical issue because their utilization is over, 90%, and you could visualize that very easily on the map by having the ability to size the links based on their metric value. I'll show you when we go into the map creation process. We additionally have the ability to color the links based on that metric information as well. So if you're creating a map and you realize you don't have an alert policy that maybe captures a particular use case based around an indicator, that you would be able to basically set up that coloring, similar to how you would do it in the top end widget through the cell coloring that we have today, where you could set up a set of rules that says, if the utilization is over 60%, color it yellow. If it's over 90%, color it red, etc. And you can sort of set up pseudo alert policies that way within the coloring of the map. And then the last thing we have is we recognize that maps can be very, very complicated, and maybe you want to find what you're looking for. So we actually list everything that is on the map in terms of devices, objects, device groups, object groups, etc. In this case, I only really have devices and objects because of the map that I've created. And we give you the ability to very quickly search. And I can look for anything with the name Chicago, either as the name or as part of the object associated with it. So if I knew I was looking for a particular access point, for example, I could narrow it down, find it, and make sure that it exists on my map. Right now, the functionality here is a little limited, but we will be expanding that in the future to allow more interactivity here. But it's really nice to know that if you're looking for something specific and you're not sure it's on the map, you have the mechanism to go there. Ooh, all right. One more major consumption feature, and I'll take a break and open it up for some questions, assuming that you guys haven't been rapid firing in the chat. Another big piece about status is that both status maps and live maps today within SevOne are always, this is the most current. And so right now I'm looking at, here are the alerts and the severities and the metrics of what's going on right now. But New York has been having problems. Chicago's been having problems. You might want to be able to say, well, what did the map look like 2 hours ago, 4 hours ago, so that I can get some context as to when did things go bad and how did they go bad, not just that things have gone bad. Obviously, when alerts are triggered, there are oftentimes, lead up to those events. They don't just suddenly spike, and you can be able to see that behavior over time. So what we've provided is a mechanism of a time slider down here. Now this is part of the beta, but we are readjusting this before we go GA. So this is not the final look and feel, but the concepts are all going to be there. And I have the ability to say, I want to look at the past 24 hours. And this will actually change the time slider date from the 14th back to the 13th. And I actually have the ability to say, I want to go and look at things yesterday. And I want to look, so 5:30 yesterday. And you'll notice a lot of the more severe warnings elsewhere settled down and they became warnings as opposed to critical or emergency. Now, obviously, New York City and Chicago are still having problems, which means their problems there have been long-lived and it's a demo environment, so we don't really have anyone rushing out to fix these things. But you do have the ability to keep going back or forward through time. And as you notice, as I do this, the map will actually, both in terms of metrics, the lines change size, and then eventually the alerts will trigger back. And some of the newer alerts will come in. And then when I am done with basically scrubbing back and forth through time, and you'll notice the warnings here now became critical, I have the ability to click live, and that will automatically just basically take away the time slider and the time span that I was looking at and snap things back to the most current and live data. So this gives you historical context. I can see, hey, when did the New York City Edge device start having problems? What was it, a couple of hours ago, a couple of days ago, etc. We give you that context. That's a lot, and I'm going to pause to allow any questions because I know that was a lot of information I threw at you, and I want to give you guys time to consume it before I start going into the map creation process, because there's a lot more stuff there. Anyone have any questions?
Rob, there's a question in chat from Antonio. Is it possible to also measure or estimate by somehow the impacts at the UX level?
It's possible to also measure estimate impacts at UX level. So, Antonio, can you give me some clarity on that? What do you mean by impact, I guess? Start.
Hey, Rob, it might be worth noting that the metrics that you attach to any node or link don't necessarily need network metrics. So if you are or if you're capturing some sort of application level metric, you can place them on the node and do some sort of styling based on those metrics as well.
See, this is why we keep Matt around, because he predicted what Antonio was asking for, which is great. Yeah, so Antonio, we basically, the way we look at it, and I'll show you when we go through the creation process of this, is if the NMS is collecting it, you can display it on a live map. So right now, obviously, I'm looking at network stuff in terms of the network level, because that's what most of our customers and what I'm most familiar with. But if you are collecting application level data and that is being collected by the NMS, you can assign it to, it can be assigned to nodes and links. So you would have the ability to show that information. So yeah, absolutely, you could put that on a map if it's being collected by the NMS. We tried very hard to be very flexible in terms of what can be displayed on here because again, doing more with the data that you're already collecting, we don't want to be, we don't want to limit you because we're trying to unlock the potential of that data. And then additionally, we want to build on this as almost though it's a platform so that we can provide more data from different data sources in the future. So a good example of that is my counterpart over in the flow department really wants to start putting flow information on top of a live map. There's some challenges we have to get through to do that, but like that's on the roadmap of things we want to do is put like flow data on top of this so that there's, pardon me, more and more information that can be shown here. But absolutely, you capturing APM information, you can definitely add it to the map, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. Any other questions from anyone right now? If not, I'll dive into map creation. All right. So map creation, we tried to make it as easy as possible, considering how complicated maps can be. So I'm gonna pop into edit mode right here, and I'm just gonna start out creating a new map. So one of the things we did is we wanted to make it easy to create a map, and then additionally we wanted to provide some tooling in order to make it easy to explore data. As I said before, right now, if you're a DI user, and especially if you're an unprivileged user, you don't have the ability to create your own reports. You're sort of locked into the experience that report creators or administrators have given you. Which is usually great because you get this out of the box experience, and then you know the reports you need to do and how to do your job. But if you ever run into a situation where you maybe want to do something different that hasn't been pre-built for you, there's some churn there because you have to like contact somebody and they have to build it for you. So what we've done is, if let's say I hypothetically and really responsible for Chicago devices, and I'm told by my boss, hey, there's something seems to be going wrong with Chicago, could you please go look at it? And I don't have a map that's pre-built for Chicago. I have the ability to go in and say, hey, I'm going to, real quick, I know that what I care about is Chicago. So I'm going to hop into this device group and say, boom, Chicago, come over and just real quick add it to the map. And what this tells me is, yes, there's absolutely something going wrong with Chicago because I have, I have the number 46 and it's red, which means the highest alert severity is critical. And then we also by default put in this nice halo, which actually gives you a breakdown of all of the alert severities other than just the most serious one. So I can actually see that there's, obviously there's a few critical or emergency, there's a couple criticals, there's some warnings, and so on and so forth. But obviously the device group doesn't get me a whole lot necessarily off the bat. So we provided a convenience function for this group action called expand the group. So I can click this button, and when doing any sort of information or other resource adding, I have the ability now to just expose this out, and it shows me all of the devices within my device group. And I can see very quickly here that, yeah, there's a little bit going on with the Chicago access point. but again, it's an access point. But the firewall seems to be having issues. So now I know I should probably be going and looking at the firewall. And I could real quick just switch over to view mode right now, and I can see what's going on here, interact with that, and go deal with those alerts and see what's going on. But we're focused on, hey, I want to see relationships. So the question here then would be, how, what's related and how is it impacting? So what we did is for devices, I have the ability to click over, and I can actually generate more information based on the topology information that has been collected within the NMS. And so I can actually go and not only just generate by topology, I can turn on this filtering by the link type, and I can actually look at the underlying technology of how the information was collected. So I can come in and say, I only want to look at physical connections. Or, hey, I know that's probably, BGP has been giving us problems for weeks. I want to make sure that that's okay, and I can click BGP and build out the topology that way. Or I can come over and look at individual logical stuff, or say, I have this user-defined thing in the NMS. This list is built dynamically from DI based on what's available and what's being collected in the NMS. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to leave everything on because it makes for a better demo, because we are in a small lab environment. I don't have, an entire rich network of all sorts of protocols in order to pull data in. But with a quick click of the button, we do the same thing. Hopefully we do the same thing. Everything's stacked up on top of each other? Or do you just not have data? Oops. There we go. All right. Like I said, beta software. But as you can see very, very quickly, what has happened is we've gone through the process of automatically from that firewall, going through, finding all of the devices that are connected, connected them based on their direction of travel, assigned objects to them automatically, and then started overlaying that alert information immediately. And so, within a few clicks, I have something that's about as data rich and significant as what I had shown you before. And then we provide a bunch of nice layout features so that you can, lay these things out in a way that maybe makes sense automatically. And then if you don't like any of those options, we provide the custom option. Well, I'm going to start with Lens, where you can come in and just start dragging and placing everything that you would want to on the map. So I have the ability to sort of override any of the default layouts to make it look the way I would want. Additionally, we've done some really nice stuff where, because we've brought all of this data in via that topology information, we've automatically tagged the information on the map. And what is useful about this is I've built this whole map out. I used all of the protocols that were available. I have all of this stuff laid out in the map. Maybe it doesn't provide, maybe it's too much information. So we've provided the ability to tag either manually or automatically. So I can come in here and I can deselect all that stuff, and it turns all of that off. It helps remove the noise. And then I can come back and say, all right, how's BGP? All right, looks like the BGP is fine. How about all of the logical links? Okay, a couple of them, those are having problems. Let me look at the physical ones. The physical ones are, and I can slowly go back, option by option to build back the entire map. You can do the same thing with the nodes, and we will be doing some automatic tagging in the future around device type and object type. But I could come in here and I could actually provide a tag. And so this is a firewall, and I could name it a firewall. Or if I knew that that device was represented by a particular vendor, like a Cisco or something, I could add those in there. Those are then added over the options, and this gives me the ability then to filter those things, turn them on and off on the map. So if I want to look at, is a problem existing with all of our firewalls, you can do that, turn everything off on the map and say, just turn on the firewalls, let me see firewalls, so on and so forth. And I've had a couple of sample maps where I've done that in the past. But this gives you the ability to have very complicated maps and provide a way for users who are consuming those maps to have the ability to do it and turn them on one by one, so they can kind of turn off the noise and look only at the signal, or they can turn off the haystack and only turn on the needle. Cool. Let's see. So what happens if you don't care about the canvas mode, or a canvas mode isn't your primary thing? What about that map mode? So maps are a little harder because you can't just throw a bunch of stuff on a map. You need to know that where it exists, because Chicago devices belong in Chicago, London devices belong in London, San Francisco devices belong in San Francisco. So again, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, hey, I want to find for example, Chicago device, add it to my resources here. We have this cool little toggle. If I turn this on, I can actually use metadata from the NMS. And so I pick the namespace and I pick the attribute, and we filter these attributes out by anything that's whose data type is latitude longitude, so we know that it's valid. When I add this, this little globe icon will come up in the resource selector here. It will actually show you whether or not this particular device has the metadata of latitude and longitude. So I can add that, and as you notice, it quickly came over and dumped this device right on into Chicago, where it belongs in the world. And so that's really nice because it actually dials in with or works in conjunction with those shortcuts that I was showing you earlier around generating topology. So I can come back here and I can say, hey, generate based on topology. And unfortunately, not everything in our lab environment has latitude and longitude, but very quickly you can notice, hey, there's some data in New York, there's some data in Chicago, there's some stuff in San Francisco, and it looks like the rest of it ended up, there's some stuff in London, and then there's a bunch of nodes that ended up in off the coast of Africa because they didn't have a latitude and longitude. But you can see very quickly how you can end up generating very complicated maps with the geographic location being shown there because we're pulling that information in. Additionally, if you do something like this, which is a complicated action that does a lot of automated things, we provide a toaster notification up here that allows you to undo that particular action. So I went from a very simple map of a single device to this very complicated map. If I went and did too much too quickly, I can always just click undo, and that'll do one of those actions and bring it back. And then I can say, hey, let's just maybe start with one hop and see how that goes. And maybe that's a little less crazy. So in this case, it grabbed everything in Chicago. And then it grabbed a bunch of stuff. Looks like a device in New York, and then it looks like there's probably some other information down here. Looks like our Delaware. I don't know why our Delaware device, Matt, doesn't have metadata in it, but so be it. But again, all of these actions can be overwritten. So this didn't place where it's supposed to. So I can come and manually drop that down in Newark, Delaware, where it belongs, and have the map there. So yeah, it's really quickly. Really easy to leverage that information. Again, if it's being stored in the NMS, we can use it to help make map creation even easier if desired. So metrics. So let's say I am kind of rebuilding the same map that I had before, where it's a more simplified version of this. So let's say I want to look at octets in and out again, because that's the map that I care about the most. Selected this link. I can come over to metrics. And I can, what we've done is we already know that you're dealing with an object and what that object is. So we've actually filtered the list of indicators that are based upon that. And I come over and just say, give me HC in octets and give me HC out octets. I add them. And when I do that, I have, they're instantly added the map. So if I come over to view mode now, I can come over to metrics and I can instantly see that data there. And so when Matt and I were talking about how, hey, anything that you want can be added, that's what we mean. That you can come over here and pick whatever indicator is available based for that particular object. It's there as an option. Additionally, you can do the same thing for the nodes. So the nodes here, because we built this out through topology, they are represented by devices at the moment. So we have the Chicago firewall. I come in and basically point out any object I want if desired. So I can come in and, okay, we'll look at the IP of the device, and I can say, I want to look at jitter, and I can add that. And then if I come back to the view mode under metrics, I can actually see that jitter is non-existent for this particular device, but I can add whatever sort of metric I want, either to the nodes themselves or the links between them. Let's see. We have a bunch of visualization options. So here we're trying to keep things as easy and simple as possible while providing a lot of flexibility. If you want to make things really, really simple, if you're used to status maps, for example, you have the ability to turn off the inner node labels. You can turn off the halos, if I can find where that is right now. So you have basic simple circles. You can even turn off our auto sizing, so everything looks the same. And this can get you something, and then I think even with status maps, you could turn off the labels, which I think is over here. And then you basically just have a bunch of simple dots on a map that you can have that similar experience. But we wanted to provide more functionality here. So like I said, we have labeling, auto sizing. So here, basically what we've done is we've given you the ability to size based on the count of alert. So I'll probably turn those back on. And then we basically, what we've done is said, take the largest number on the map and then the lowest number in the map, which for alerts is always going to be 0 because you can't have negative alerts. And then basically take the upper end and make it, in this case, we size it up from 100% to 150, which you could go as large as you want. And then for anything that's small, you can go, we're currently at 75%, and you can shrink it down to 25%. So the really little guys get really, really little. And the goal here is so that you can take that emphasis that I was talking about earlier, drag it out, even be larger. We also have like I said before, the ability to size the links, and you can do the same thing, but around the metric value on those links, so the in and out octets. But we also have the ability, right now we're coloring the links by alert status. But like I said, we can do the same thing with metric value. So I can come in here and say from a particular range to a particular range, add a color, and then I can just keep going and adding more and more colors. And this gives me the ability to say, for the first 100 megabytes, make everything green. From 100 to 200, make it, yellow, and so on and so forth. And it gives the option to add coloring to a map. I'm not going to do that right now, but you get the idea. There is an option. Here's where we provide those top-end views. When you were in view mode, you can select whatever you want from your particular instance. So you have the as many options as you like. We give you the ability to show 3 at a time. And then we have a couple of more very useful features. And these were actually directly from a bunch of customer feedback we did when we were doing research for this. A lot of that came back from the ability of customers saying that in large complicated maps, everything is always red. And so what we wanted to do is provide the ability to say, we want to simplify maps based on the things that you care most about. So we did this in 2 ways. One is the ability to look at the alerts that you care about. So I come in and say, I don't care about debug or info or even notice. So as you notice, the Chicago core device went from actually having a notice alert, 2 of them, it looks like. I can turn those off and say, notices are nice, it's information for me, but I don't want anyone to look at it until we're up to even the error level. And this basically gives you a way to focus only on those things that are most severe and basically ignore everything else, which is helpful in a couple of use cases. The big one is, especially for large customers who are heavily adopted into alert policies, is alert policy filtering. So this gives you the ability to go through and say, I want to design a map for a very specific use case. So let's say you are on the capacity planning team and you want to provide a live map that shows things that only the capacity planning team cares about. You can go in and grab, one or many alert policies that are relevant to the capacity planning team. I'm just going to pick a couple as an example. And what we automatically do then is we provide them as a filter option over here on the left, where I can come in and say, I want to look, one by one at what those things are. But this gives you the ability that if there's another team somewhere in your organization that has a lot of alert policies, you don't have to have those alerts polluting your map. You can keep your map, pure and looking in the use case that you care about with alerts that are only relevant to you. So that way, you don't end up wasting time looking at a critical alert that isn't even anything that's relevant to you because it's something that the capacity planning team has to worry about. And so we see this as a very nice feature because it will help customers who have a bunch of noisy stuff that isn't really relevant to them, but always causes everything to be, orange or red. You can turn all that noise off by turning on this alert policy filtering. Okay. That's also a ton of information. So please, if you have any questions, drop them in chat before I show you probably the final piece, and then we'll go into wrap up. So I'll give people time to chat some stuff as I go back and load up the map that we started with. All right, I'll keep an eye out and Matt can stop me. But the last real piece of this is that we've built this workflow. We think it's pretty neat, what with the time slider and the sidebar and being able to see alerts and metrics. But we also view this as a jumping off point. Come in, load up this map, you have a big screen, you can see all this stuff, you can switch back and forth. But we've also provided the ability to report link, something that we've already done today, and users of Data Insight are very familiar with, is the ability to, traverse a workflow going from report to report to report. We've done that within the mapping concept as well. So I can come in here and I can say, looking at this device, I can hop into device summary. Or over here, I have objects and I have indicators. I come in and immediately jump in here. So I can say, hey, I want to look at this object summary. We jump in, we bring over the actual object selected. This is coming into our out-of-the-box object summary, where I can see, all the indicators at a glance for that object, look at the alerts, where they're laid out, and then actually see a performance metrics over the time span. And I'm basically within context as I would be anywhere else if I had gone through any other report where I have my additional tabs. But we also give you a breadcrumb where you can actually go back and look at the map that you were just looking at very, very quickly, and which is really helpful. However, that's a nice workflow, and you can set that up as a workflow, but maybe you don't even like the way we've laid out this whole page. We hope not, but maybe that's the case. Maybe you want to do something better for your users. So we actually provided the ability where we still have our LiveMaps widget. There's a brand new LiveMaps widget. It's currently in the widget palette under beta, but it provides all of that functionality. So what I've built here essentially is a report that basically does all the same things that the LiveMap page does. And this took me all of 10 minutes yesterday to put together. So what I've done is I've selected the map that I want to look at, which is that map that we were looking at. And because we have both alerts and metric information on the map, I have the ability to chain to, using our chaining abilities, to both alerts as well as top N and PM widgets. So now I have the ability that if I want to come in and look at a particular device, that device does not have metrics, but it does have alerts, and the alert page has changed, where now I'm looking at Chicago Firewall, where if I go up and I pick one of the linkages here, I actually have the top end is just showing the 2 items here, and I can actually see a line graph over time. And I would have the ability, from here, where if I had, say, flow information, I could link this to a flow widget, or if I was using, our log widget, I could chain this to a log widget where I could see all of this stuff within context. So as I move about the map, selecting different items, I can actually see alerts and metric information laid out across the map very quickly. And we actually do this similar thing up with variables, where the map is actually responsive to variables. So we'll actually pop around the map basically on what you're selecting. So I can single select or multi-select a number of devices, and it will actually show me all of those within context, and actually zoom to them and show me what I'm looking for. I don't think the New York City firewall is in there, but I can look at Chicago core and it'll zoom in. We currently have a bug where that doesn't actually propagate down, but for GA, it'll look like it's also been clicked, and then you'll see all the relevant information along with it. So again, all of that same information within a report, which gives you the ability to things like favorite, default it, so it's a home page, so people dump in and look at that. We also give the report creator a bunch of options to turn certain things on and off. As you notice, I can't switch between map and canvas mode in here, nor look at any of the filtering options. I've turned all that stuff off as a map creator, but we still even have the ability to go back and look at the time slider. So that functionality is still there, even as a report, report consumer. All right, so I have I think I have one wrap-up slide, so I will pause here. And again, give a pause for any questions as I switch back over to the slide deck. All right, so share PowerPoint. And we're gonna turn this back on. All right, so we had one more poll, basically after having gone through that information. So I see it's popped up already. So if everyone wouldn't mind, it'd be great to give us some feedback as to what you saw today. I'll keep monitoring chat, so if anyone has any closing questions, I know I did most of the conversation today, and I would love to answer any questions anyone might have. So really these poll questions are basically around, we're trying to get a sense of customers. Obviously this functionality really encourages the use of topological collection. It also encourages the ability to add latitude and longitude information to your system. And we're just curious about, providing even more functionality based on what our customers currently collect and what they're currently using. And then obviously what you guys found the most compelling, so we can go in that direction into the future. Well, thank you, Antonio. I appreciate you attending. So we'll give it a couple more minutes for the polls, but I'm very curious to see what people are collecting.
Just had a question hit the chat. Can LiveMaps generate syslog errors on each connected devices on a node? So one thing that the SevOne NMS can do is receive syslog messages, by way of traps or something similar to that. So if that is happening, then those same messages will appear in that side panel that Rob was showing earlier, alongside all of the system generated. Hope that answers the question. Or are you asking if LiveMaps itself can generate the events, the syslog events? So LiveMaps itself, the console won't generate the events, but the SevOne NMS can. So when a threshold is violated that the NMS knows about or it has configured, it can send a syslog trap. So I guess the long story short there is that the NMS supports both the inbound and the outbound syslog.
I see Matt answer the question about scaling. So for those who may not have noticed, the question was how resource intensive has you found this to be? And the reality is we've worked very hard to make sure that we can scale up to being having very large maps. So we've done tests. I wouldn't recommend it because it becomes very difficult to read, but upwards of 500 devices, or I should say nodes in the map, which are usually devices. And we found that it's very intensive on the end user's computer, just because you're trying to store status and render all of those dots and pan and zoom and around. But we have found that we've done some testing maps with 100, 150, 200 nodes in the map, and we found it to be relatively, it's not as fast as the demo you saw today, but it's still very performant, and we are pleased with that. And we'll continue to try to make things speedier, but we expect for most of the use cases, performance won't be an issue.
Yeah, we have found that the browser tends to fall over before the back end.
Yeah, certainly, and that's obviously something we were very careful about because we'd rather the user's computer or browser fail rather than blowing up the back end. And we have some safeguards in place so that if you tried to do, I think the largest number of topological hops you can do is 10. We limit the number of results that we bring back so that you can't do something crazy like ask for your entire network of 20,000 devices or something. We do have some sensible safeguards in place to make sure users don't do something ill-advised that may hurt the system at large. Are the nodes already been enabled creating topology when it's been added in SevOne, or user must do it manually? Okay, so I'm going to try to answer that question, Richmond. So we view the topology information and the sort of group stuff as ways to create a map very quickly. But once that map is created, it's very static. And so you can go back as a user and like regenerate the topology, for example, and to look for more devices that have been added through discovery. It does not happen automatic though. The reason that we've done this is because we thought about that, we kind of experimented with it, but it causes a lot of very odd edge cases. So there's some danger in you have a network map of your entire map, and then let's say something goes wrong with Discovery for some reason, and Discovery ends up saying that, hey, all of New York City is now gone. If we automatically update it based on topology, what would happen is rather than seeing a bunch of alerts of like this stuff is down and everything's red, which would lead you to go look at New York and try to figure out what the heck was going on, the map would instead just disappear those devices. Those nodes and the links between them would just go off the map. And so in some use cases, you may want to do that where you've deleted a device, it's no longer active within the network. And yeah, having not to go back to the map and having to manually delete it sounds great. In other cases, you want to have it still be there with a bunch of error information saying, hey, this is bad. And so what we're trying to do in our research and development is try to figure out how to accommodate both use cases, how to make sure that users understand what is supposed to be not there and what is automatically gone. And there's just a lot of questions that come up with that. So rather than rushing something out like that out, we wanted to take the time to make sure we did it well. Because we understand that if, for example, you were a user and suddenly stuff disappeared from your map that wasn't supposed to be there, that would be, unbelievably frustrating. So instead, it's a little bit more manual for now, but we're working on ways to make it more automatic, both in terms of devices moving if they're long updates, and as well as if the topology changes, being able to show that automatically on the map as well. A little more R&D that needs to be done. Hopefully that answered your question.
That's good stuff, Rob. It might also be worth noting that the topology widget in the standard reporting framework can act as a point in time record of topology, right? So like whatever like the current topology status is, you can get that in a report with a topology widget. So simply refreshing the report would show you the latest topology, so to speak.
Well, I think we've hit the end of our time. I want to thank everyone for attending.
We just got one more question about the release plan.
Yeah, Chris. So right now, the stuff that you saw today in the demo is already out. It's in 3.10. So that is marked as beta. So you probably noticed in the demo the side panel was said beta, and then if you were to create a report and try to add a new LiveMap widget, there'd be a beta tag there. In 3.11, which is slated to be released towards the end of January, so in less than a month. 3.11, those beta tags will go away, and then things will be officially GA, and that's where we expect all of the sort of polish that's still a couple of rough edges still in there. That'll all be ironed out, and it'll be GA for everyone to use. But if you're curious and seeing a little bit sooner, I suggest upgrading to 3.10 and try it out. And I think that's the perfect summation question. So again, thanks everyone for attending. We appreciate your time. And thank you, Matt and Mandy and Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you.